And we're going to move from a discussion of the requirements for telework to a case study of how one agency, as I mentioned earlier, the Environmental Protection Agency, decided to approach the issue of meeting those requirements. And I'm very pleased to have two presenters with us on the case study. And by the way, you have a copy of the case study in your folder, a written copy of the case study. But we have with us today Sharon Ridings, the National Training Manager for EPA, who I might add was presenting at the Blacks in Government conference in Boston earlier this week, and made a special effort to get in here last night in the face of the earthquake. And so we're very happy to have her with us here today. And also Dick Morton, Senior Instructor for the Graduate School USA. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to Sharon and Dick, and they'll organize it the way that they see fit.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Frank. Thank you. And welcome. We did want to spend a little time on the case study. What has happened here is we worked with EPA since about 2009, identifying telework and coming up with a methodology for meeting a mandatory training requirement and on a nationwide basis. It was a little unique, and we would like to share some of that uniqueness with you. Hopefully, from the discussion and the questions you asked, you gained some ideas on additional ways we as trainers can get the support we need to do the programs we want to do them. And number two is get the results that we're expecting when we start a program like that. So keep those two things in mind as we go through this. We, as Frank mentioned, we do have a copy of the case study, and you're welcome to follow along. Let me just touch on this. Now, we're going to be talking about the specific case study. However, we're in hopes that you'll find that most of this is transferable to other mandatory training programs that you might have. So we encourage you to think in that context as we're going through this. And please, by all means, throughout this entire thing, ask questions when you have them. You don't have to wait until the end if you have a question. There's also some cards on the front, middle of the table if you want to jot them down quick so you don't forget it. We don't want you to forget the questions you've got. This is a good time to get them answered. It's mentioned that Sharon and I are here today to talk with you. This is the outline of how we're going to go through this. And it's similar to the way the case study is set up. We're going to give you some introduction background on the case itself. What went into this? Why did it happen? The telework experience, what it was like, the program preparation. How did we prepare this program together to make it available and ready to give us the results we wanted with the agency managers? We do want to spend a few minutes on challenges and solutions. What were some of the challenges we faced? You're training officers. When you put together a training program, it doesn't always go 100% smooth. There are challenges you face and you have to overcome. We faced a lot of challenges. We want to talk about some of those. Results and program outlooks. What happened as a result of this? What is EPA looking for within the telework field now? What's happening? And then finally, we'll talk about some of the success factors we think were definitely applicable here, and we believe will be applicable to other programs. So we'd like to share them with you. So let's move on. And at this point, I'd like EPA to give us a little background on the mission, culture, and climate.
Good morning. It's good to be here today with you all. I didn't actually expect this many people to show up after yesterday. I was in Boston, and I was sitting in the conference, and the table started to move. So I looked around and I thought, okay, I lived in California long enough to know that I need to get in the doorway. So I'm standing there and people are looking at me and I said, it'll pass, it'll be fast. Everybody else is panicking. I'm like, I got this. So it's good to be here today. Delay in flights coming back to DC, but I'm glad to be here. Talk a little bit about EPA. As you know, our mission is to protect human health and the environment. And one of the clear messages that came across, especially with telework, is the idea of clean air. And Alexis mentioned that this morning. Big thing for us is to reduce our carbon footprint. And so this gives us a wonderful opportunity to look at our mission and say, okay, we can do this. You know, this is something that we've been doing since 1997. Our Region 9 office in San Francisco has experienced many earthquakes, much bigger than what we experienced yesterday. And so they have really implemented the idea of telework in a very big way. So this was not news to them. And so we're actually been talking to them on a regular basis, trying to figure out what are they doing, what are the messages that they're sharing with their employees to figure out what works and how to set up good telework processes. So limited use of telework was what was normal across the board, especially here at headquarters. A lot of resistance in the laboratories because of the type of work that they were doing. And so this was a big challenge for us, is really get out there and say, how do we move this forward, linking it to our mission and really understanding what we could do in order to make this successful. Let's see what else. I think that's it. Oh, after 9/11 too, that was a big thing for us, especially with Philadelphia and New York, and everyone was working so closely in the efforts around 9/11. That became something that was really knitted into our COOP plan, is to how do we work across the board with telework and making sure that we're prepared for that.
And we saw at that time there was a federal challenge. Throughout the federal government, a lot of agencies were wrestling with telework. How do we make this work? There was a lot of discussion going on with Congress. If you recall, the House actually passed the Enhancement Act a year before the Senate really gave us serious consideration. So they were working. It should have been the 2009 Enhancement Act. So there was a lot of movement. EPA saw that, and I believe it was in November 2009 is when I was first called in to start some of this discussion. And EPA had already been discussing this and trying to figure out what needed to be done. They knew there was some movement about throughout the government to move federal telework forward, and they identified a training need that Sharon's already shared some of that. There was an inconsistency, a lack of everybody applying as fully as they could. What could be done? And she identified a training need. So what do we do? It was a call for action for EPA to do something. How do we move this forward?
So we knew that the act was in Congress, and we knew that it was going to be moving forward. So we wanted to be more proactive, because as you know, when something comes up, you have to rush through and get it out the door. And so we wanted to make sure that we were very prepared for this. So we went out and did a proper rule of three. We went out and looked at different vendors who were offering different types of training around telework. And we decided that the graduate school would be our best choice for that because of their experience with working with the federal government. And also we've had experience working with them in the past that have been very successful. So it actually started in the policy shop. And for those of you who are in training and development, I would highly recommend that you work with your policy shop very closely, because it came to us as just classroom training. And as you know, most of us have people that are working in remote locations. We have people out in the Outer Banks that are 2s and 3s in an office, and you can't bring training, classroom training, to those folks, and we certainly don't have the travel dollars to bring them in. And we did not know at that time that the graduate school also offered this as a web-based training. And so it was already written up as classroom training. And we knew that that was going to be a good factor for us. And so we really worked with the graduate school. Dick came in and he actually presented it to the telework coordinators, which we've had in place for quite some time now. And really gave good feedback on what would work for EPA. Number one, the fact that we've had telework in place since 1997, maybe not to this greatest degree that we could, but certainly the people were very aware of what telework was. And also, we wanted to make sure that our supervisors were prepared to have those good conversations with their employees to identify whether or not they had portable work, and to make sure that their performance was up to standard. And so how do you say yes, and how do you say no, and how do you have those conversations? So those were some of the things that we really worked with Dick to make sure that the training covered.
And those agency issues became the driver for us on how we put the program together. You can deliver telework training, you can throw it out there, say, okay, mandatory telework training, here it is. But if it's not customized for what you've identified as the training officer, what the needs are for your agency, the results you get may not be as beneficial as we would hope they would be. You're spending dollars for training, you should get the results that you anticipate. So the value is important. So having those discussions up front and understanding exactly what the agency real issues were and what they were striving to get. Not just meet the mandatory training requirement, but what were the nuances that were required within EPA. And so we did spend some time working on massaging the information, getting a program together that would actually meet those needs. And the training, we did determine that training, in fact, was an answer that would help us to get that consistent message and identify all those issues that Sharon talked about. But the next step was then to prepare for that. And when it was identified as a nationwide rollout, we had to discover what the scope was. How big a rollout, how much time do we have, et cetera. Well, they wanted to do it as quickly as possible so everybody gets the same message quickly, and they're all able to implement it simultaneously without a lot of, why are they doing this? Everybody would understand what's going on. So the idea was, let's do it in a 2 to 3 month window, get it all rolled out. We realized then, okay, we've got to use the breadth and scope that the grad school had to enable that to happen. We already have regional centers. They dovetail pretty much with the regional centers for EPA. So as long as we had a point of contact from the grad school centers and a point of contact from EPA, then we could start developing the materials, start setting up schedules, and work this out. We had to also identify instructors. I figure I'm a pretty good instructor on telework, but I can't hit all the sites simultaneously. We went through the instructor base, came up with a number of instructors. We whittled it down to 14 instructors that we used nationwide because a lot of the sessions were handling and occurring basically simultaneously. So it was important to have that base. So we started that, make sure we gathered the information on what EPA wanted in the materials, make sure that was put in there. We used an intake form that we developed on some of the challenges that were occurring within EPA, some of the concerns that they had, and actually try to capture that information so we could share it into the development of the materials. We drafted it, and as Sharon mentioned earlier, we did pilot it in June. And so that pilot then became the initial session that told us, okay, this is what's working. This exercise isn't working quite as well as it should. So let's beef that up a little bit, etc. So we could actually launch the program. We did do the coordination. We did the scheduling, the coordination of regional schedules. The regional schedules drove the training. When do they need it in their region? We had our grad school instructors many times have assignments made 12 months out. So we had to do a number of replacements for those instructors on the courses that they were assigned to so we could allow for them to be able to meet the requirements. But we were able to meet all the requirements that the regions had for us. Okay. Build it and they will come. That's sort of what the program looked like, the cover. The idea was, okay, now that we've got it built, we know what needs to be in there, we should be able to have the maximum attendance at this. And we try to figure out, okay, if we have 30 people, let's make sure we've got a space where we can handle 30 people simultaneously. And we had 63 sessions. I think if you're reading your book there, we had 63 sessions going. So that's a lot of people to put through here. But during this time period, now I mentioned that we started this in June, and this is June 2010. When did Alexis mention that the enactment was finalized? December 9th. Well, wait a minute. If we started in June, we were ahead of that. And I think that's an important distinction, so I'd like to take just a second and read something to you, and that is on page 3 of your case study, the second paragraph. In 2009, EPA leadership was in the middle of updating its telework policies. It was apparent from the congressional hearings that additional legislation would be forthcoming. EPA leadership made a decision to defer the final policy update until the passage of the new telework legislation. But to first begin the process of re-educating its managers to provide an understanding of telework, the current law, EPA's own telework policy, and telework best practices. That is a key item because EPA made the decision not to delay the training until after the passage, just the finalization of the policy. They didn't want to put the policy out there and then have to change the policy because of the language in the new law. Makes a lot of sense. But we don't need to delay the training. We know basically what needs to be in that training. So let's launch that now. So when the new law comes out, is signed, and we're able to finalize the policy, the people have already been trained and can hit the ground running with the new policy. And I give them a lot of credit for that because that was a leap of faith on their part to make sure they did, but it gave them an edge on the law coming in. So the fact that EPA moved from their desired, what they wanted, to a legally required. During that time period, a legal requirement came, but they anticipated this by looking at what was going on with Congress. And then we had to have a flexible approach on dealing with any changes that occurred based on the law. And we handled that primarily with a few additional handouts that we gave the students. And I spent a little more time with our instructor base, making sure we had one-on-one on what the program changes or the implementation of the law would mean. Make sure each one had a narrative. In fact, each instructor had a package like this that had not only the law in there in our presentation, but they also had all the CBAs, collective bargaining agreements. Do you realize how many CBAs are involved with a nationwide? Well, you do. A lot of you are nationwide. How many collective bargaining agreements do you have in your agency? Not only the headquarters, but on the regions. Well, most of the time we were dealing with at least 7 different collective bargaining agreements within EPA. So they had the policy and they had their collective bargaining agreements. And some of our managers that we were working with had to worry about all those. Depending on what member of the team they were dealing with, they might be using a different legal requirement, a different collective bargaining agreement. And they had to be aware of that. And if they had to be aware of that, our instructors had to be aware of it. So it was a lot of time for the instructors to get caught up to speed so they could answer the questions of the managers. So we made sure that every instructor in every region had all the collective bargaining agreements that would pertain to that region so they could answer those questions, as well as the telework policy. Okay. Challenges and solutions. Okay. We had a number of challenges, and on page 5 of your case study, we sort of go through those. But scheduling was the first one. The scheduling had to meet the regional needs. We had to get rid of these conflicting instructor schedules. Yeah, we did come down to 14 instructors. We had a few more of that initially, but in order to make them, free them up, we still had to work out some elimination of some conflicts. And we had to have enough bench strength to add on sessions when they were needed toward the end of this. So we had to do that. As far as the pending legislative changes, we knew the changes were going to occur. So how do we make the materials flexible enough initially to capture the policy and what EPA anticipated the policy changes were going to be, and still meet the changes that were going to happen in Congress? It took a lot of understanding of what Congress is going through, understanding what the law that the OPM, not the law, the enactment that the House had already passed, what was in there, what was in jeopardy of changing, and a leap of faith, as I mentioned earlier, of moving that forward. How about maximizing attendance? What did EPA do to try to maximize the attendance?
Thank you. That was really difficult for us up front, and I have to admit that, or confess, that if you don't have a memo from your senior management team that goes down that says you will attend, that can cause some challenges. And so even though we had requested that up front, it was slow in coming. And so what happened is we would have very small classes up at first. And so once we were able to get that message out that it was mandatory to attend, the class sizes picked up and everyone was able to get into the right classes. So that caused some issues for us up front. But, hindsight, now we know what to do the next time out the door, but there's a lot of lessons learned for us as we went through this. The other part of it was that we were not partnering with policy. And then when it was handed over to the training department, we had to manage some things there were some gaps. And so we had to fill those gaps in so that we could get the classes up and running.
Okay. And another thing that EPA did is we had the schedule, we had the 63 sessions, but at the end they found that a number of managers, for good and salient reasons, because they're managers and they're busy, had conflicts and were not able to attend the session that they were supposed to attend. So they added some sessions at the end. They reached out, they worked with the regions, and came up with some ways to try to accommodate managers so they could even get in after the initial program was completed. So we were able to help accommodate it. Again, they did not lose sight of the message, what they wanted to do. They wanted a consistent message given to the majority of their management, so they could take that consistent message and then translate it for the employees. So it was important that a lot of them get taken care of. Yes, Frank?
Sharon, you mentioned, I think, two things that you did or would have liked to have done. A memo from top management saying this is mandatory training, and you also offered some additional sessions. If you had it to do over again, is there anything else you would do to try to make sure that all the managers got the training? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. Yeah, there's a lot of lessons learned here. The one of the thing is, though, especially in learning and development, we have to realize that we need to use technology and to more our advantage. And so knowing that we have people that are in the remote locations or are not able to get to a classroom session, that we need to use a blended learning approach. And that's one of the things that we would do the next time, is have the classroom sessions for those who can attend and then do more of the e-based learning.
Some kind of independent study, e-based learning.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
One of the, and another outcome for the grad school out of this is, it became obvious throughout this entire process that that was an important element that we should be looking at. And we've really pushed the GS Connect side, which is the remote web-based access that Sharon mentioned earlier, of the grad school on the telework. And we actually did a pilot program earlier to share telework and how that works. It does require a different format. The main thing with telework is OPM has a very, very good site, and most agencies require their employees and their managers to go online and take that web-based training, which is good. But what we were dealing with was something beyond that, because what was most important to the managers that we had in front of us was, what's the EPA policy? What are the EPA collective bargaining agreements that need to be considered? What's happening within EPA to make this work? How do we do it within EPA? And I think that's the important distinction, is there may be a need when you've got mandatory training. How do we make this personal for the individual? And I think one of the things that does is enhance the participants' willingness to attend the training. Yes, it's mandatory. I've got to attend it anyways. But can we entice them? What's in it for them? What are they going to get out of it? And if it's something that deals with their specific situations, you're probably going to get a little bit more response from it. And a little bit more willingness, and they'll take more away from it. And the most important thing here is they get the results. It's not that they attend the training and they hear the speaker. They got something out of it. They were able to apply back in the workforce. That's the most important thing. consistent training message was important, and what we did there is that one-on-one that I had with each of the instructors to make sure that they had the message. We took the PowerPoint, we put the notes. Though you're familiar with PowerPoint, you know you can get a notes page, and we put the notes in so all the instructors would have the same notes. When we're doing an exercise, this is the outcome we want from this exercise. So they understood not only how to run the exercise, but what you're looking for at the other end. Those types of details, and then walking through it. And they all had experience with teleworking anyway, so it lent itself to this situation very well. And then the numerous collective bargaining agreements, for me, that was initially because I was working with the headquarters and I was working with 2 collective bargaining agreements. It wasn't until we started talking to regional people that I realized, whoops, we've got more collective bargaining agreements out there. And as I mentioned, there are a lot. We worked with a lot more. We ended up with 7 that we were using routinely in all the regions. So that's a lot of agreements. And for a manager, that's a lot of things to manage when they're working with the teams, to keep track of all, and they're all different.
Dick, you have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I have a couple of questions. How long was the instructor-led training?
A number of the people sat through the pilot. They actually attended the pilot session we did in June, so they sat through the entire session. We did some one-on-one online with them, and basically it was lasted from 1 to 2 hours because they already knew Telework, so we didn't need to cram a lot down. And they were in remote sites. I was doing it, and they were basically able to would walk through the program because they had already looked at it and walk through the exercises and the flow of the program and not spend all the time on each module.
Right, and let me just say, it was 3 hours for the classroom sessions, and they're very interactive. There were a lot of discussions in the groups, talking about best practices, talking about how to have discussions with employees. So it's not just a talking head. It was very interactive and participant-based, which was really important to us. So.
And do you feel that, I know you said that a blending learning approach would be the way to go if you were to change things, and then it was important to make it EPA specific.
Yes.
But do you feel moving forward that an online version could completely replace the instructor-led, or did you really feel like the experience in the classroom was so valuable that you don't think one could replace the other?
So what we did to take care of that is that we're doing the OPM training because the OPM training courses are really well done for the employees and for the supervisors, but that covers the what. And the classroom sessions and the e-based training that we're trying to facilitate is about the why. Why are we doing it, and how? How do you have those discussions? How do you set up really good telework performance standards? And how do you measure success in that? And so those were the different things we were trying to address. So you can, by blending it, and then we also had a teleconference afterwards to actually have people talk about their best case scenarios and what they were doing that was helping them be successful at implementing telework around in their organizations. So when you say blended, it can't just be classroom, it can't be just e-learning. It has to be a little bit more than that, so there's more interaction. Now, if you have access to something that's truly blended and you have interactive, then that's really great because then people can learn from each other. You can have them move into rooms and things like that. But it depends on the technology that you have available to you.
Yeah, and thank you, because the GS Connect, the program we did put together on that, actually it only goes about 2 hours. So it's a little bit shorter version, but we do use breakout rooms, and the breakout rooms are critical because people have questions, they have concerns, they want to have that interaction, and even if they're not physically located together, if you can simulate that, and you've got to have an online breakout room capability. So you have, like you're sitting around the table now, you have all of you may not physically see each other, but you can talk to each other, and you're in a separate breakout room, and this group is a separate breakout room, and then you bring them back together and share their reports and everything. Technology is there to support it. Let's take a moment and just, I'd like to run you through just a quick version of one of the exercises, so you get an experience of this. We talked about this. This the idea of this connectivity and the exercise. This exercise, so I'm going to ask you at your tables to do this exercise with us. And basically, I'm only going to give you a few minutes. I'd like you to put on your teleworker hat. Right now, you are a teleworker within your team, whichever team it is. And I'd like, with your colleagues and non-colleagues around the table, let's take the next 3 or 4 minutes. Well, we'll make it 4 minutes, and just talk about what would be the challenges on implementing telework within your team. What would be the challenges of implementing telework within your team? And we're going to ask somebody to sort of get a couple of those challenges, just a couple of challenges, so that we can share with the group. But let's go ahead and do that each table. Any questions on the exercise at all? I'm going to give you 4 minutes. Go ahead. You're a teleworker. What's going to be the challenges you're going to have implementing telework within your team? Okay, thank you.
Glad you could make it. It's a hurricane. Very well, a hurricane coming up.
Give you 1 more minute. 1 more minute.
So you have a large
There could be days where it's exactly there, but I don't talk. So and this was the situation last time. I was like, it's interesting. It's not here.
I guess they want to see what it's about. Yeah, Secret Service. Exactly. President doesn't want them doing that from home. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate you participating in that. Okay. I'm going to ask you to do one more thing for me before we do these reports. Actually, I'm going to ask you two more things. I want you to take off that teleworker hat. I want you to put on the hat of somebody that's not teleworking that's on the team. Somebody on your team that's not teleworking. Let's do the same discussion. What are the challenges that non-teleworker is going to face on helping to make telework work within your team? So they're supporting the rest of the team. Do they have any additional challenges to be concerned with? What would be their perspective about telework and how well it works within team? Let's take 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Just if you can think of any challenges that non-teleworker might have keeping the team at a high level, what would be their challenges? Okay, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Continue your discussion, please.
I cannot tell you. I don't know if you guys get to go with it, but it seems to work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. One more indulgence. One more indulgence, please. I have one more hat for you to put on. You are now the manager of that team. You are now the manager of that team. What challenges are you going to have implementing telework within that team? What challenges? Any different challenges that you as a manager will have? Again, we'll take 2 minutes, just discuss it on your team. Any challenges you as a manager would have implementing telework? Thank you.
Just talk about what's different. Okay.
And I'll just switch to somebody else, just review some things we're seeing throughout. And then we go through the success factors.
If there's issues.
Yeah, these little things, yeah. I'll just do the second section, because it's just your wrap up, is in a couple slides, which is for, you've already done the exercise, so it's You said you got the training web-based is 2 hours. Do you take a break, or do you just keep going for 2 hours?
We kept on going. Yeah, because they get the breakout session and everything. I see some people use that, so I shouldn't say every time, because it was a change of things. We did two breakouts.
Good. It's usually 90 minutes is a good, but if you're going for 2 hours, it's only 15 minutes. You know, even if you go to a show, 90 minutes is what they do. You go to casinos to a show, it's 90 minutes.
I get a way that you got too much about it. You got too much we're trying to get a conversation. Objectives of what do you want to accomplish. We thought about a reading it or something like would be great, but you can't fit it.
No, because you know they don't. So what if there was a part 1 and part 2?
That's definitely possible.
You know, and then you don't have to take them consecutively, you just have to take both.
That's a good idea. Then we can get it down, we get all the material, the same training outcomes we want, and get it down to lessons.
Right. Because we did CEO training broken because it's a whole day, and we did part 1 and part 2. They didn't have to take the whole day at the same time. So it worked out pretty well.
Okay, again, thank you very much. Thank you. That's the type of exercise we do on the breakout we did with the EPA. Basically, it gave, now consider we had all managers. They weren't necessarily in the same department, but they were all managers sitting at the table. So the discussion was a little bit different, perhaps. You are cross agencies, so you're bringing different perspectives in. But what we found is, in some cases, there was a lot of chatter going on during this, a lot of challenges that the managers face. And we started with the managers. What is a manager? What are the challenges you're going to face? But then we had them put the other hat on of the employee, the teleworker, and then the non-teleworker. And we asked them to take that same exercise back to the workplace, sit down with their team, and have the same type of discussion. Find out firsthand from each other what are the challenges from your perspective you're looking at, so we can gain an appreciation for each other's viewpoint. We wanted to share that with you today because it's something you can use for any mandatory training. It's not just telework. Anything that you're trying to do within an agency that you want to do, it's a technique of getting that information back to the team and getting input from the team, information and input from the stakeholders on how it's going to affect them or how they perceive it's going to affect them. It's very valuable. If we have an opportunity right now, I'd like to get from a couple tables, what was one of the challenges that you came up with at your table from a teleworker standpoint? That was the first group we did, the teleworker. And how about at this table? Have you got one challenge that you'd be willing to share? One challenge you had as a teleworker? Connected to the network. That connectivity, very, very important. Thank you. How about over at this table, was there another challenge that you came up with from the teleworker's perspective?
We came up with, work product. How do you measure the work product?
Oh, measuring work products. We want to be successful as teleworkers. We want to be successful as workers. How are our products going to be measured? How do we assist the manager in measuring those so we'll get a attaboy or attagirl that we did the right things? So that, very important. Thank you. Okay, how about from the second group we did was a non-teleworker. Was there a challenge that you came up with at this table as a non-teleworker?
I think it was the customer service having to fill in behind the person who's
Yeah.
the perception of it.
Perception that now you've got to fill in for that person. There's a positive side of that, and I think Sharon's going to address that a little bit. But yes, that idea that you've got to fill in. If something needs to be done and that person is not physically there, there may be a need for somebody to step up to the plate and make it happen. And actually, I'm going to talk about that in a second too. But okay, thank you. How about at this table, was there another challenge that the non-teleworker faced?
The telework day, so I can't be there for
Ooh.
the meeting, or I can't deliver when I should, if I need to be there in person.
Well, that'll help build the team, won't it? Yeah. Very, very real. If that is a perception, if that is what we're facing, the good information for us as managers, if we know that that's what our team has identified as a challenge, a concern, then at least we have some information to work with that we might be able to develop something. How do we solve that? And we could get into a discussion on, okay, how do we solve this challenge? How are we going to eliminate it within this team? And have a frank discussion about it and get it taken care of before it becomes a problem for you. All right, let's talk about that last challenge, the telework manager. Back in this table back here. Did you come up with a challenge for the telework manager?
Productivity.
Productivity.
The person actually doing the work that they were assigned to do during that time.
Oh, I can't see them. Are they doing it? Are they doing it? How do I know they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? And that sort of relates to trust, right? So how do I know this? What's going to happen? Good. It's a challenge. If they're feeling that, the manager's feeling that, let's have a discussion and be frank with your team. How do I know this is being done? I'm responsible for the productivity of the team. How do I know it's being done until I can't afford for the team not to be successful? So we can have that discussion. How about over at the back table here? Did you have something else as a challenge?
Creative to come up with projects for people who don't have portable duties, so that they can telework anything, weather or something.
Okay. The idea of planning ahead and being creative for helping people understand what work could be done in a telework environment if the emergency situation occurs. Some of us have very potable work we can do in a different location. We don't have to be physically in the office to do it. Others, we may have to look for the individual task and be a little creative on how that can be done. So if we have an earthquake and we're all out of the building for a day or two, we have something that we can work in. Or we have a snowmageddon like we did a couple of years ago, I think, here. What can be done to allow people to not have to take leave, that they could be productive in a non-work environment? Okay, thank you. Thank you. We wanted you to go through the idea of the exercise, and I thank you for playing along with us and participating in this. Sometimes this exercise goes a long, long time because there's a lot of concerns. The benefit of this type of exercise is that, number one, gets some of the frustrations out into the open. And we want to do that. If we're trying to give some new information, we want to get any hesitancies, any problems that exist out and away. So we as trainers then can step in there and give them some new information. But if they've still got that, if they've still got resentment about the program, concern about the program, challenges that they don't think are being listened to, they're not going to hear what we got to say. So we're trying to get that out and then give them a chance to share. So thank you very much. I'd like to now move on to the end. What does telework look like in EPA today? So, Sharon.
I'm really happy to report that we're in much better shape when it comes to telework. I'll tell you, one of the challenges that we had is we have several large laboratories, and when you talk to the scientists that have been around for a very long time and they're used to that very hands-on work, the discussions always came back to, well, they can't telework, they have to be in the lab. And so one of the questions I always ask them is, do they have to write reports? At the end of their experiments, do they have to write reports? Oh, yeah. Okay. Could they write those reports at home? Oh, okay. So it's really stepping back and looking to see, do you have portable work? And as Alexis mentioned earlier, you have to go through that whole exercise to look at each and every type of job that you have and determine, is there any portable work that's associated with that position. And we have a lot of types of tasks that have PII or have sensitive information, and some organizations, my husband works for the FBI, you know, and there's a lot of, you got your high side and your low side, and you can't get access to that information, and so I totally understand that. My daughter also works for the FBI, and I have no idea what she does, and that's okay, but she can't telework because she has that. So you have to really look at each position, what are the tasks that are assigned, and identify whether or not there is an opportunity to telework. Now, there's two options there. You can have regular telework or episodic telework, and that's what we've really started to look at. For those individuals who are not comfortable with telework, and I have to tell you, in training and development, I'm not comfortable with it. I wasn't comfortable with it, because we need to be there for our customers, don't we? We need to set up the classrooms. I need to make sure all that back-end work is done. I want to make sure somebody's in the office to greet their customers when they come in, take care of them. And then I thought, you know what, I need to try this out. So we started with episodic. And a lot of our managers are doing just that. They're trying out with episodic as a trial basis, and then they're finding out that, hey, wait, this kind of works for us. And so we're seeing that there's more and more regular telework, even if it's once a pay day, or pay week, or pay schedule, or once a week, and it's starting to really come alive in the organization. What I'm also finding is that some of my staff members are actually doing more work because they are concentrating on that project, on that task. And so we're seeing a lot more productivity in some of the areas, which is great. The other thing we talked about is people that are at work versus the people that are working at home or on an alternative work site, is that we now have more backups. So people are learning each other's jobs so that if they're not in the office, well, I telework on Tuesdays and I would telework on Thursdays, so we learn each other's jobs so somebody's in there to take care of the customers when they walk in the door. That has gone over really well. So our standard operating procedures are all now in place because we realize that we need those, pass them off, works really well. Let's see, cross-training, improve supervisor conversations. That's one of the things, as we did a lot of those exercises in the classroom, is what does it sound like? You know, get it out of your mouth. What does it sound like? How do you have that conversation? Talking about trust at a much higher level than we've ever had before. You know, well, how do I know if they're getting the work done? Well, how do you know if they're getting the work done when they're in the office? Okay. Right. So, you know, what do? Sit there and watch them? No. Okay. So there is that too. And you have to look at your bargaining agreements because you cannot ask them to report daily if they have regular telework. You have to make sure that you have an agreement. This is what we're measuring. And so I sat down with all 9 of my staff members and said, okay, let's talk about telework. You know, what are my responsibilities? What are your responsibilities? We're all adults. Let's lay it out on the table. What are our concerns? And I have a couple staff members that don't want to telework. They don't feel that they would be as productive as home. I'm like, yeah, you. So that works for us. 95% of EPA employees can actually telework. Okay, and so we're finding that those numbers are actually increasing. Now, that doesn't mean telework regular. That could be just episodic. The other thing we're watching very closely now is the weather. Now, I can't tell you when an earthquake's going to happen, but certainly here, especially here at headquarters, we can watch the weather. So we'll sit down and we do what we call a huddle and say, okay, it looks like we might have snow tomorrow. If that happens, does everybody have portable work? Okay, so everybody's okay. We have that discussion break, then we go back to work. Okay, so they know that they need to take their laptops home or they need to take their work home with them so that they can access work and they don't have to take leave that way. So it really has increased our productivity overall. And I'm really excited about that, especially for my own organization. And we've also made sure that it's included in our COOP. It's actually practiced in the COOP. So we've had 3 COOP exercises since we finished our telework training, and it's gotten better and better each time we do it because everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. So it's worked out really well. So those are our success stories.
And elsewhere, we provide telework throughout the government. What we've been seeing is, number one, some of the conversations around executive board tables now automatically include telework. They start thinking about telework. And so when they've got a new program or something they want to do, they say, well, how is that going to impact our teleworkers or this type of thing? So we're starting that, and that's important because we're starting to get a sense at all levels that telework is a consideration. A number of agencies now have changed their equipment buying policies to say any new equipment purchased, we must consider teleworkers in that purchase. So they're automatically building that into their purchase requirements around equipment. That says a lot because then it permeates the entire group. The biggest thing I have seen in the government as far as the impact of telework, and it's not really the telework, and I'll explain that in a second, is the fact that the productivity of the team has been increasing. The ability of the team to get things done, the performance of the team is going from norming to performing. They're moving up. And the reason is not directly telework, it's because people are paying attention. The entire team is paying attention to planning better about what they're doing. They're not just waiting until they show up in the morning to get things done. They've thought about it at least a day ahead of time about what they need to do. They start doing that as a regular course. And each individual in that team is taking more responsibility and more accountability. And that responsibility and that accountability equals enhanced team performance. It's happening. It's happening in pockets right now, but you watch. In a few years, we're going to see this throughout the government. The performance, and that helps the manager. So they should be very supportive of the program. Those are one of the benefits. In a few years, we'll be able to show that. Anyway, we're running out of time, but in your case study, you have a lot of success factors. We do believe, and there's more discussion on it, we do believe you should involve senior leaders early on, get that commitment, that buy-in, help them, get them to champion it. Experience, depth, and flexibility are important. When you partner, make sure that you've got the experience and depth and flexibility of your partner to meet your changing needs. Stakeholder involvement, important. We do it at least at the pilot level. Make sure they're involved so you understand really what was required. I mentioned about not knowing about the fact that I had to consider more CBAs when I was out in the regions. I didn't know that until we got past the pilot, actually, because we were dealing with headquarters. And so that was union implications. Within our line of work, if there are union implications, think about them. Plan for them in there. Collective bargaining agreements are a valid legal document, and we can't let our managers violate those. So we need to keep that in mind when we're developing training, especially mandatory training. Evaluate the progress and share best practices. We're not only reporting back on what we did right or wrong, we want to be learning organizations. We want to apply that back to improve it. Telework is just the stage we're in right now. The way we work in the workforce is changing, and it's going to be vastly different in 5 years from now than it is right now. We're just in this moment. We need to get it right now. So if we got a plan that's in place, program that's in place, and it's not working exactly right, we need to tweak it and get it working right so it's working as the best we can, because tomorrow is going to be something else, but we're evolving toward that. Okay. Enhance the learning outcomes. We as trainers enhance the learning outcomes, maximize the cost-benefit value of the training opportunities, and look for flexible, innovative ways. And Sharon has mentioned some of those, looking at connectivity, looking at the way we use web-based and interactive training in order to be able to reach the majority of the people that we need to, and partner well. That's basically it. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer them. We are pretty much out of time, though. But I thank you very much for being good sports and participating with us today. Thank
you. Sharon, Dick, thank you very much. Great presentation. Alexis stressed trust, and I think Sharon stressed trust. Also, I think it might have been President Reagan who said trust, but verify. And another piece of this is the performance management system. And my understanding is that EPA has a very strong performance management system. My own take on it is you need that whether you have telework or not, because as Sharon said, what are you going to do? Sit there and watch them, work? So whether you have telework or not, you need that, but that performance management system is a key piece, in my mind, of the telework process. Not only do I hear that EPA has a very strong performance management system, but that Sharon does a dynamite presentation on the EPA performance management system. So maybe someday we can entice her to come back and share some of the details of the EPA performance management system with us. Again, thank you, Sharon and Dick. Great presentation.